Let me share my screen, and we will begin with this topic of the transition from Christianity to Islam. We are mostly through with our discussion of Christianity, and the closer we get to the Baha'i faith, the more excited I get, and especially dealing with Islam interests me tremendously because I've learned so much about it since becoming a Baha'i. I'm not a scholar in Islam, I'm not an expert. But it is important that we know, I think, as Baha'is, a few things about it. And I will begin the introduction to Islam tonight. But I hope to leave plenty of time for questions and for suggestions. I wish you would write me suggestions, either via my website or on chat tonight, that you would like to see dealt with about Islam. So as we conclude Christianity, we might want to ask ourselves, what is the period that we would say is the effulgence of true Christianity? And frankly, that question is impossible to answer because it depends on what your definition of Christianity is. As we've seen, there are many variations on many sects of Christianity. And I'll show you a couple of interesting graphs tonight that demonstrate that. Perhaps 380 is again, this sounds so early, doesn't it? With the Edict of Thessalonica, which was when the Roman Empire made Christianity the state religion. Though according to poet W.B. Yeats, the empire of Byzantium was for him, this lasted 1,000 years. This is Eastern Christianity, Eastern Orthodox Christianity, was the epitome of the Christian dispensation, as is implicit in his famous poem, Sailing to Byzantium, which we could spend an hour discussing. I love that poem. But for him, it was the wonderful synthesis of civilization, art, and religion. So where did it come about? And well, as you can see, the empire of Byzantium at its height encompassed a good portion of the Eastern Mediterranean, including parts of Europe. You can see all of Greece, which is still Orthodox, Greek Orthodox religion. So you have the center of the Byzantine Empire was Constantinople, what is now Istanbul. And of course, we know Constantinople is extremely important insofar as the Baha'i faith is concerned, because this is one of the places to which Baha'u'llah was exiled. The magnificent Hagia Sophia, now officially the Hagia Sophia Grand Mosque, was originally the church Hagia Sophia, built in 537 as part of the Byzantine Empire. And it's just an incredibly gorgeous thing, inside and out. Outside, and this is how it stands today. It's a mosque because, again, this is in an area that was for many years during the whole Ottoman Empire, was the center of the caliphate. Was Constantinople was. So there is a sequence in the schism of Christianity that we're not going to go over in detail, but I'll give you a glimpse of what happened. Most of the schisms at the beginning were based on the bifurcation to the answer of, was Christ God, the same essence as God, or was he an ordinary man? They never fully countenanced, as I say here, the response by Muhammad and the Baha'i teachings of an intermediary or third possibility, the concept of the manifestation. an intermediary who is more than an ordinary human, but distinct from the essential reality of God. The Great Schism is, of course, one of the most important divisions in Christianity, even though there were quarrels at the various ecumenical councils about the nature of Christ. As I said in the last class, that this whole study is called Christology. It's a philosophical or theological body unto itself. But notice this is very curious, that the sort of coup de grace that caused the ultimate final split between the Western Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Church was whether leavened or unleavened bread should be used in the Eucharist. That sounds so inconsequential, and yet it's on small things like this that you have, for example, the difference between the Methodist and Baptist, among other things, is that Baptists baptized by immersion, whereas you are simply given a little douse on the top of your head if you're a Methodist, as I was. So there were various divisions within the church of areas that are sees, as they're called, and that comes from the word, as you can see down at the note at the bottom, from the Latin word sedes, which means a seat or a throne, and it means the place where the was the center of that religion. And so in the Roman Empire, you had Rome and Constantinople, the See of Alexandria, the See of Antioch, and the See of Jerusalem. Some of the visions in Christianity after the Great Schism are usefully shown on this. And again, remember, you'll be able to download these so you can look at them more closely at your leisure and see. This is, I like this kind of tree chart because it shows the first sequence, the Great Schism, and then you have the Reformation when Luther posts his theses on the church door, and you have Protestantism begun as it splits off from the Western Catholic Church. And then off of that, you have the Church of England, which splits off because Henry VIII wanted to get a divorce and couldn't do it under the Catholic Church, so he created his own church, and so on. There's no sense in my going into so much detail, but this you will find useful. The next one also is more detailed and perhaps even more useful. Goes from left to right chronologically. So you can see there's little sense in our trying to say, well, where is true Christianity? It depends on what you believe as a Christian, and each one of these have some distinguishing characteristics about its system of beliefs. Most of them are dealing with who Christ was, but there are other things, as we saw, some of them can be very minuscule and seemingly ostensibly petty. I'm going to just show you how interesting this can be, however, insofar as what happens. My field of study officially was Old and Middle English literature, Anglo-Saxon literature, and so on. And so this is one that I particularly love, just as an example of what happened to Christianity. During the Roman Empire, when this is the date 117 AD, of course, is a couple hundred years before Christianity was made the state religion, but it's essentially the same map. And so you can see that up here, you have you have England, and you can see all of it except what is now Scotland, which was occupied by the Romans, and it was called Britannia. And it was the people who lived there, other than the Roman soldiers and so on, were the Celtic peoples. Now, Whoops, excuse me. I did that before, didn't I? Here, let me do that again. So when the empire became Christian in 380, so did the Celtic peoples. So they became Christianized when the Roman Empire became Christianized. But when in 410 the Roman troops withdrew to protect Rome against invading tribes, the Anglo-Saxon tribes invaded Britannia and drove out or enslaved the Christianized Celts, and then established 7 different kingdoms. It was called a heptarchy, meaning 7 kingdoms. And here you have the Britannia, and you see the Utes or Jutes went to Kent, the Saxons to the southern part, the Angles into what became Mercia and to Northumbria. And so you have these 7 kingdoms. And so you can see there's Wessex, Sussex, Kent, Essex, East Anglia, Mercia, which in the Middle Ages split into 2 parts, and Northumbria, meaning north of the Humber River. Now, so what happened then? Now, these are all Anglo-Saxon tribes who have their own polytheistic religion. But in 597, a mission from Rome was sent to begin converting the Anglo-Saxons, and they started in Kent. And the king of Kent became converted. Then his daughter married Edwin of Northumbria, who was king of Northumbria, as his second wife. And so all of Northumbria naturally became Christian. Now, to what extent the common people knew what they believed or anything is obviously kind of specious and worthy of a lot of conversation. There was a lot written about it by the clerics at the time saying, these people don't know anything about Christianity, and they didn't, but neither did the priests who were teaching them. This means that the conflict between England and the Britons, the Celts, in Wales and in Cornwall and in Ireland, and the Britons who escaped and crossed the Channel and went to what became Brittany in France, are all from the same people. And so this is the basis for why you ultimately have this schism between the Celtic Irish Catholics in the Republic of Ireland and the Anglican English in Northern Ireland. This is where it all starts. Meanwhile, as all this is happening, Islam is just beginning to flourish in the Arabian Peninsula, uniting diverse tribes into what becomes a Muslim state during the lifetime of Muhammad. So this is the same time period. We're talking about the 6th and 7th century, all right? But before we examine Islam systematically, I want to share with you a few interesting facts that relate to our particular perspective as looking at this through a Baha'i lens. You would do very well to read the Christian prophecies from the book of Revelations as interpreted or explicated by Abdul Baha in Some Answered Questions, chapter 11, the commentary on the 11th chapter of the Revelation of St. John, and chapter 13, the commentary on the 12th chapter of the Revelation of St. John. These are the most well-known symbolic chapters in this highly symbolic work, and he explains that they're talking about the advent of Islam. And we'll go into that later, but you'll find it incredibly fascinating that here this last major book in the New Testament is prophesying the coming of the Comforter, Muhammad. Also, I wish you would reflect on the following statements by The Guardian regarding Islam. Now, this is, the quote begins here. I don't indicate it until we go through the 4 slides that are all quotes from The Guardian about Islam and about the value of Baha'is, really anyone, but particularly Baha'is, understanding Islam. Because it has an amazing influence, not just on the Middle East or Northern Africa, but as you're going to hear, Shoghi Effendi says that it is the source of the Renaissance. So all that became the height of the high Middle Ages on into the Renaissance is the influence of Islam and the learning that Muhammad and the religion of Islam instigated. When medieval Europe was plunged in darkest barbarism, the Arabs, regenerated and transformed by the spirit released by the religion of Muhammad, were busily engaged in establishing a civilization the kind of which their contemporary Christians in Europe had never witnessed before. It was eventually through Arabs that civilization was introduced to the West. It was through them that the philosophy, science, and culture which the old Greeks had developed found their way into Europe. And here I'll go back a few slides and show you. Notice this is why the Roman Empire fell, because of the invasion of the Vandals here in Carthage, the Goths, the Visigoths, the Huns, and the Franks go into what becomes France, and indeed Charles the Great was a descendant of the Franks. Not Charles the Great. Yes, Charlemagne, Charles the Great. So the Arabs were the ablest translators and linguists of their age, and it is thanks to them that the writings of such well-known thinkers as Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle were made available to the Westerners. It is wholly unfair to attribute the efflorescence of European culture during the Renaissance period to the influence of Christianity. It was mainly the product of the forces released by the Mohammedan dispensation. Isn't that amazing? And maybe most of you knew that. But if you didn't, it's incredible to think about. And it's not just a Baha'i idea. Many scholars have observed this. But it's interesting to know the geography of how this happened. And we'll look at that. To go on with this same passage, from the standpoint of institutionalism, Islam far surpasses true Christianity as we know it in the Gospels. And of course, we saw that there really was no institution that Christ described or discussed, nor did the disciples have some specific plan for how the churches should be organized. There are infinitely more laws and institutions in the Quran than in the Gospel, while the latter's emphasis is mainly, not to say wholly, on individual and personal conduct. The Quran stresses the importance of society. This social emphasis acquires added importance and significance in the Baha'i revelation. When carefully and impartially compared, the Quran marks a definite advancement on the Gospel from the standpoint of spiritual and humanitarian progress. Then finally, in this last part of this same quote, the truth is that Western historians have for many centuries distorted the facts to suit their religious and ancestral prejudices. The Baha'is should try to study history anew and to base all their investigations first and foremost on the written scriptures of Islam and Christianity, the written scriptures, as opposed to what was done to them and with them and how they were added to and distorted. Now, that's really an amazing statement and bears a lot of study. And we will show how this occurs. Some of the major concerns we will discuss, and as I say, I would appreciate your informing me of any that aren't included here. And as we go through, finish up tonight, of things you would like to see discussed or hear discussed or contribute to. in our discussion of Islam, again, particularly from our Baha'i perspective or from through a Baha'i lens of progressive revelation. The life, and these aren't necessarily in the order we will discuss them, but the life and challenges of Muhammad. He was attacked from the very outset of his declaration of his station as an apostle of God. The utterances of Muhammad, which were both written down when he was revealing what he said were words given to him through the angel Gabriel, but also things he said when he wasn't in this trance-like state, which are called hadiths. The structure and themes of the Quran, this is something that you will find very revealing. At least I find them so very, very fascinating. The structure and evolution of the religion itself, the institution of Islam. The major doctrines of Islam. The 5 pillars of Islam. The problem with succession, because as you probably know, or if you don't, we're going to discuss that at length, that at his death, Islam immediately split into the two major divisions of Islam, of Sunni and Shia. We'll discuss that in full. What might have happened, and what I mean by that is, if things had gone the way they were supposed to and his covenant had not been breached, how easily it could have fallen into place and prepared the way for the advent of the Bab and the resurrection. What happened instead and why it happened and so on, because all of that's part of one subject really. And how do we redeem Islam in the West? Because this is something that Shoghi Effendi says should be one of the goals of Baha'i scholars, to redeem Islam in the West. Well,